Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. I'm Chris Muntz. This is episode 29, part 2 of the podcast mini-series Choral Music, a Human Art Form. In this episode, I'll be talking to Maria Ellis, a choir director from St. Louis, about her story carving out a place for herself, essentially, in the choral world, and making room for a girl conductor. Maria has an awesome line of clothing and accessories and other types of teaching materials under the label of Girl Conductor. And you'll hear the story where that came from, and I think you'll immediately understand why this fits in so well with the series that I'm doing in February, all wrapped around this concept of what the choir world could and should look like if we all begin to see each other as parts of a truly human art form. I mean, the choral art form is the most human of art forms because we are an instrument. We are the instrument. We are the medium. We are everything required to create the art is in the form of a human being. And when we start seeing that in each other, we will start to realize the potential of the choral art form as the most transcendent human, universally human art form, rather than all of the little subgenres of choral music that we like to place ourselves in. And it's okay to have expertise in one subgenre, I think, or a few subgenre of choral music, but that shouldn't be how we identify ourselves as a community in my mind. I think we should identify ourselves as a choral music family, as a community, and this series is dedicated to that concept. So stick around and listen to my conversation with Maria. I think you will find her to be a breath of fresh air, and you'll probably get something out of this talk as well, something that you can take into your classrooms and things that you can take into your community as you try to reach out your choral net and bring in as many people as you can into this art form that we all love. Before we get to the full talk, I just wanted to remind you that if you are a listener to this show, either new or have been around since the very beginning, thank you for being here. There are some things that you can do to spread the word about any topics that we discuss on the show and to be a participant in the conversation. These are all things that help broaden the conversation. So step one, leave a comment on the app that you use if it lets you. So I know Spotify doesn't, some of them do. Apple Podcasts is a huge. Leave a comment or a review. That helps other people find the conversation, which is really important. Leave a rating anywhere that you can. Facebook even allows you to leave a rating on the Facebook page, Choralosophy Podcast. Of course, you can like there. You can retweet episodes. You can comment on posts that you see from the show. These are all things, again, that's the way social media works. The visibility becomes that much greater when you interact and let people know what you're thinking. Then, of course, if you'd like to do that in a more private way, you can also send email to choralosophy@gmail.com and respond to anything that you hear on the show. If you'd like to ask a question or throw a point out there, who knows, it might even lead to an episode. If I get enough feedback about a topic, I would definitely then want to keep talking about that topic because that would tell me that there is more to discuss in that area. So these are things that are really, really helpful so that anything you can do to spread the word is awesome. And then, of course, you can get very intimately involved by joining the Patreon page on patreon.com/choralosophy. And at that site, for as little as $3 a month, you're going to get an extra episode every month that is patron only. You're going to get some supplemental materials over there. You're also going to get pre-releases of all the guests that I book on the show so that you can start to throw your own questions in before I record. So those are all things that are available to you as ways to support the show, but also to become more active part of the conversation. Hope you take advantage of that. Because if you have sheet music needs, as second semester fires back up and as you're approaching your contest season, or even if you're just planning ahead for next year or for an end of the year concert, I've got two awesome friends on board with the show that you can go to and search online and have the music ready to print from your printer within seconds and not have to wait for shipping and not have to wait for a vendor to reply. You can just go right to ryanmain.com and check out some of his independently published music, which is becoming more and more popular. I'm seeing it being performed all over the country, and his stuff is so great, and you should check it out. And he does something really cool with his purchases too, where once you buy that PDF, you own it and forever, and you can make as many copies as you want forever. He doesn't make you count the copies, which is really cool. So you get that, you save the PDF, you don't have to store anything in your music library, you just store it on your computer, and then 3 years from now, when you want to do it again, you just print more because you own that copy license. So that's a really cool thing. Plus, you can enter Choralosophy at checkout, get 10% off. Then you can head over to graphitepublishing.com, and you can scroll through a whole bunch of composers over there, many that you know. So Eric Barnum, Tim Takash, Jocelyn Hagen, Joshua Shank, all kinds of stuff by many, many great composers are on there. And what I love about Graphite is their search engine to sort all their different music. So if you're looking for choirs of multiple levels, of multiple voicings, you can enter all those categories into their search engine, and it will churn out everything that's on their site that meets that criteria. So strongly encourage you to use those two sources, ryanmain.com, graphitepublishing.com. Support those awesome mom and pop businesses and send them your attention. And then when you check out, you enter Choralosophy at checkout, you get a discount, and then they know that you're listening to this show. It helps a lot. So head over there and check out those sites. Well, everybody, I'm here with Maria Ellis. Maria is a choir director that I've gotten to know a little bit over the years from St. Louis. And she and I were chatting recently on Facebook about some stuff related to recruiting, especially recruiting across cultural boundaries and across lines where people might not always know what types of culture they're dealing with. And I stopped us in the middle of our conversation and I said, we should just be talking about this on a podcast, because this is a podcast right here that people would really benefit from hearing this conversation. So we decided to stop it there and pick it up on this episode. So welcome, Maria, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to have you as a guest and been wanting to do this for a while. Also, you might know Maria from some of her Facebook posts with Girl Conductor. Tell us first about that. What is Girl Conductor?
So Girl Conductor is, you know what? I didn't know when I was in high school that as a female, I could be a conductor. I thought females in music that you were either a singer or you could teach in a classroom, but I didn't know that you could actually conduct choirs or orchestras for a living. Mm-hmm. And so when I got out of high school, I went like the business route and worked for AT&T for 12 years. I made great money, but I did not like my job, and decided at the age of 31 to go back and get a music degree. Wow. And from then, I started looking for stuff that said conductor, and I could never find anything that said conductor. And I was like, well, you know what? If I can't find it, I'll just make it myself. And here is the Girl Conductor line and the brand, and just celebrating all females and women who conduct.
That's awesome. So take us then for a little bit further back. So I was going to ask you about some of your journey towards being a choir director anyway. So if you must have done music then as a kid that made you come back to music at age 31. So tell us a little bit about that, the childhood music experience.
Sure. So my father has 8 siblings, and they had a group called the Chapman Singers. And it was just a choir of all of them. So like kind of like the Jackson 5, but just with 9, you know?
Okay.
And I loved going to their rehearsals and listening to my aunts sing. I have aunts who have beautiful soprano voices and then those really chesty alto voices, and just loved hearing them sing. So I started singing when I was about 3 years old. And in church, we had a young people's choir, and I became a director at the age of 12 and absolutely loved it. Loved every second of it. Conducted our gospel choir in high school. I went to Review Gardens, and we had a really, really good high school gospel choir. So conducted that. And then when it was time to go to school, I wanted to have a career in music, but I just didn't know that I could be a full-time conductor. And so I went the business route. Now, this is interesting because our school, we didn't have formal music reading. So everything we learned was either by rote, or you was just listening to the radio or listening to a CD or I think tapes. I think we were still doing tapes back then. But listen to a CD or a tape and learning the songs. And so when I decided to leave AT&T and go audition for an UMSL, I wasn't let in because I couldn't read music. Mm. So the teacher told me, she said, you have a great voice, She said, but you have no formal voice training. And I was like, no, but I can sing. And she was like, yeah, you can. But you probably should get a voice trainer. And I was like, okay. And she was like, you can't read the music. And I was like, no, but I mean, I pick it up fast. So if you play it, I can sing it back.
Mhm.
And she was like, well, come back next year and audition again. And I was like, yeah, I can't do that because I had just signed off to be laid off from my job.
Mm.
Um, because if you got laid off, they were paying for 2 years to go back to school. So I gave my job up. Yes, and audition again. And she said, yeah, but you probably should come back in January. And I said, no, if school starts in August, then I'll be back in August. And I spent that summer working with a friend of mine who had just graduated with a music degree. And we spent the whole summer like teaching me how to read music and how to count rhythms and stuff that for some people they learn in school, but just our school didn't teach music theory. That wasn't a course that
Mhm.
was offered. So we took the summer and we learned, and I came back in and re-auditioned again, and they they said, we will take you. And I was behind, Chris. I was so behind, and it was a very humbling experience. So to be 31 in the classroom with somebody who's 18 and they can do everything, and you struggling trying to figure out how to count one and two and because it
Mhm.
was not a skill that I had. It was a very humbling experience, but very, very rewarding because I used my networking skills to friend everybody on campus. Became like a big sister
Right.
to the students, and I was like everything to them. What y'all need? Y'all hungry? Okay, let's go. Come to the house, and I'll fry up some chicken, and then you can show me how to count these notes and how to do this theory homework, and that's what I did, and networked and graduated in 2017 with my undergrad in music education and got a job with the St. Louis Children's Choirs. And I love what we do. I absolutely love it. So there you go. That's a little backstory.
That is awesome. I knew about you some of the like all I knew was that you didn't come to music education kind of in the traditional path of going straight from high school into college,
Hmm.
like most of us do. I just didn't know all the background. So that's really fascinating. What an awesome story and journey into doing something that you love. And I think that's a cool story, even taking it outside of the choir world. That's just if your life is going to age 30 and it's not the way you're wanting it to go, you tear it up and you change it,
Yeah.
which is just awesome. That's an example to set, I think. So, okay. So then here would be a question I think that would tie directly, I think, into that story and into your experience when jumping into the choir world, not only as a person who is older than is typical, but also as you said, you're a woman and you're a black woman. With
Hmm.
all, so your entire path puts you as kind of a minority within a minority within a
Hmm.
minority in a profession. It's almost like the inception of minorities, uh, where you had to, of course, run into some maybe some self doubt, maybe some doubt from others, maybe
Hmm.
some combination of both of those things,
Hmm.
and so to be where you are and doing what you love now, uh, what what kind of what does that mean to you emotionally to be able to be doing what you're doing now after that kind of a journey?
It means everything to me. I don't take anything that I do lightly. I wake up every morning giving thanks to God for being in a position where I can wake up and do exactly what I love to do. Um, being being black and being a female, um, I don't take that lightly at all because I don't. Unfortunately, I haven't seen a lot of black females, and I'm not saying that my sisters are not out there, but I haven't seen a lot of black females who are um, conducting at the top levels, the honor choirs, the state choirs. I haven't seen that often. So I wear that with honor that I'm representing a minority group that's not seen. I try my best to be an example for younger women, just younger women in general, not just women of color, but just women in general, saying that you can have any path that you choose. I took on the philosophy after I after being in school that, Maria, you control your own destiny. So whatever you want, go get it. You don't wait for anybody giving anything to you. And whatever skills you don't have, go find people who have those skills and learn from them, and friend those people, and share what you have. I have some things that some people I know who have studied music don't have. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's things that those people have that I don't have, and we can share and make this journey better for both parties. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an honor and a privilege to be able to have the platform that I have, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And as you know, I mentioned before we came on, and when we were chatting, that I'm doing this a series in February, all kind of wrapped around topics of inclusion and diversity representation. And so, i- with that in mind, in the time that you've been either directly involved in the choir world, or at least maybe even from your childhood and experiences you had in music when you were a kid, what kinds of things have you seen? Well, I mean, I ask this question in two parts. Have you seen progress in the area of people being open to people who don't fit the mold that we've been told is a conductor? And if so, maybe share any examples. But then also, what do we still have to do? In other words, maybe a good way to think of this big cerebral question is, what does an inclusive choral profession look like to you someday in our dream world?
So I'll start with that question first, because I think it'll tie into this first question that you asked me. Um, I think, okay, I'll just speak from my own experience. I didn't have a background of reading music. We weren't taught to read music in high school. However, I have an incredible ear. So if you sing it back to me, I can pick it up really quickly. And there's so many students who can do that. I thought all musicians could do that. I thought that anybody could play by ear, that was just a skill set that everybody had. I did not learn until a few years ago that people who are, we'll call them paper trained, people who read music, they can't play by ear. And that is just mind boggling to me, because I just thought everybody could do that. I thought that was just a natural skill.
Right.
So a world that's inclusive of all musicians would have people who are paper trained per se, and people who play by ear together, learning both crafts, and bring that all together. I hear, or I've heard as a child, I've heard that if you don't read music, you're not a good musician. And I always thought, how can that be when I have a skill or a skill set that you don't have? So how can I not be a great musician just because I can't read the notes?
Hmm.
I think there's value in both skill sets. Now after going through school, I value being paper trained, but I still also value my ear, because I can pick things up, even if it's something that I'm reading, I can still pick it up really quickly because I hear how that song should go just by my ear training. So
Hmm.
that's what I would think that a perfect world would be, with all of us together, everybody taking on the strengths that they have and then pouring into other people and getting everybody into a world where we all can help each other. Um, Now, growing up, I didn't see a lot of. I never saw women conducting, never, and I always saw white men. So I think we went to one festival when I was in high school, and that's when I actually learned that the notes on the paper were for the singers. I always thought the notes were for the piano player,
Right.
and
Okay.
that
Yeah.
the singers, we learned our music. The teacher just taught us the music, but the notes were for the piano. I didn't know that until we went to a festival, and they passed out the music and everybody was singing, and we looked at our teacher and we was like, "Why didn't you teach us the music before we got here?" And she was like, "Well, they're reading the music." And we was like, "Yeah, we're reading it. We're reading the words." She's like, "No, they're reading the notes." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Why didn't you teach us how to do that?" And
Hmm.
so, but I was a senior in high school when I learned that. So, I mean, it just tells how our education was in that setting. But I never saw women, never saw Black women besides being a music teacher. Never saw that.
Wow.
My introduction to choral music, however, was from my sixth grade teacher, who was She was white, and she knew I loved to choirs were holding. They had like an honor choir. It was called Children in Concert for Excellence. And she said, Maria, I want you to be a part of this choir. And so St. Louis Children's Choir sent home a tape, and they sent home like a packet of music for us to learn, to be a part of the choir. And so I would sit in my room with the tape with the music in front of me, reading the words, but learning the notes because they were singing the notes on the tape. So that's how I learned my part. So when I got to the festival, I was just as good or better than everybody else because I had learned the parts, learning by ear. So that's the background that I had. I never saw anything different.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I've thought about that differently over my life, when I was, see, my background learning music in church was based on reading first. I learned to read music in church before I learned it in school. My mother was the choir director in our church, and so from age 5, really the tutorial was I would sit next to her when the hymns were being sung, and she would simply take her finger and point to the notes as they were happening
Ah,
and would go across. And she never really taught me how. I just started to notice
hmm.
when I was little that when the notes go up, my voice goes up, and when the notes are filled in, they don't last very long, and when they're hollow, they last longer.
Ah,
And I just kind of put it together. Um, and then when I got to school, I kind of already knew how to read. And so for me,
okay.
it's interesting because the parallel is so similar that like because you're talking about learning by ear, and then when you found out that other people couldn't do it, you're like you were saying that I just thought everyone could do this. And I had the same experience, but through reading, where I learned to read so young that when I got to school, I was like, why can these people not do this? It's like
Now,
this is it's interesting,
what's interesting about that is your church used a hymnal. So my church,
right?
I grew up in a Pentecostal apostolic church. We didn't use hymnals, so we
Hmm.
learned hymns just by somebody singing, and it's just songs that went on, that everybody just knew. So I just thought
Hmm.
there was just certain songs that everybody just knew.
Right.
My grandmother and grandfather were AME, that's African Methodist Episcopal. So they had hymnals in their church. So again, I would just pick it up and just read. I would just read the words, and just would just hear the melody and then figure it out and just read the words. But even then, I never looked in. I never noticed that when my voice was going up, the notes were going up or going down because normally that was in 4 parts, and I didn't as a kid. I didn't understand which part. What why was there 4 lines anyway? What does that even mean? So I never even knew how to even
Right.
follow that as a
Right.
child. Um, as I got a little bit older, and then again, once learning that the notes are for the singer to figure out, okay, wait a minute, I'm singing the soprano line because that's the melody, or stuff like that. But reading it, that wasn't a thing for us because our church didn't do that.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's interesting too because, of course, we're having this conversation kind of in a with a backdrop of certain kind of cultural upbringing things that, in our case, is a
Hmm.
black white thing. But I also think it's important to point out that there are exceptions even to that. Like there are lots of types
Yes.
of quote white churches that don't read music anymore either. That
Hmm.
are reading the words on the screen and the rock bands playing and
Yes.
all
Hmm.
of that. And then there are also, like you mentioned, I think probably more in kind of the southeast part of the country. So, these big black churches that are, still singing hymns from a hymnal and have
Hmm.
the full choir and that kind of thing. And so there are exceptions
Yes.
to all these rules. But I think especially in the part of the country we live in the Midwest, um, I definitely have come across as a teacher. Um, it's one of those things where I always hate to like I hate looking at a person and trying to assume that I know something about them because of the way they look. I hate that. But that being said, if I have a black kid in my class who's a really good singer, I do assume that they sing in church,
Hmm.
and I'm almost always right.
Hmm.
But partly because of where I live and the community that I live in, that I can guess that pretty well. So every once in a while, it's not. It's just a kid who happens to have a nice voice and they don't really go to church.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of brings up a good point. This kind of ties into the Facebook conversation we were having the other day, where I kind of figured out early on, kind of like I was saying before, where my bias that I grew up with towards learning to read music as your fundamental way of learning was, it's still, I still do believe that literacy is really important for everybody.
Yes, I agree.
There is tons of brain benefit that comes from literacy, like reading the music. That's a little bit different when you're doing it by ear, but they're all important. And so, what I wish we could figure out a way to do, culturally and as a society, is talk about the benefits of one while being super super clear about how that doesn't mean that it's a better than, worse than thing.
Right,
It's just
right.
that they both have benefits that are different.
Hmm.
And I think that's something we could do a better job of, everybody. Like when we talk about stuff like this, is, say, if someone says yes, music literacy is really important in the classroom, that somebody else doesn't come back and say, well, no, because other people learn other different ways. Well, you
Hmm.
could say, well, you could actually, there's a third choice, which is those are both awesome.
Right,
And what are some ways to incorporate both into your classroom, into your church, into
right,
your,
right.
whatever. And I think so. So that's important. So what I figured out was that when I have a black student coming in ninth grade who has a what seems to be an above average ability to hear a pitch and then just not forget it, like they just keep it in their brain,
Hmm.
and it never leaves. Whereas the typical kid, when they hear the pitch for the first time, they'll need to be reminded several times, and that's like the average kid, any skin color,
Hmm.
the average kid. But then I'll get these kids every once in a while that oftentimes are black, and they have really confident voices, and they can't read the music at all. But as in terms of remembering where the key is and what their starting pitch is, they just don't forget it ever. And when I was a young teacher, I was so focused on just the fact that they didn't know how to read,
Hmm.
that I focused my feedback on the things that they needed to do to learn how to read. And of course, in my mind, I was doing it all with what I thought was in their best interest. Like I'm trying
Right.
to teach them. But then, of 4 or 5 years into my teaching career, I figured out finally that what I could be doing in those situations is pointing out to that kid how amazing their skill of pitch memory is compared to all the
Hmm.
other kids. And sometimes I even figured out to say, "Hey, do you sing in church?" Because
Hmm.
that this must be a skill you've developed. And simply by me validating to them that they're already scared in a practice room by themselves with me trying
Yeah,
to sight read,
yeah.
that I'm noticing something that they've learned in their church, which is very important to them,
Hmm.
that something that they brought to school from their church is being rewarded with their teacher saying, "Whoa, that's awesome. That's like you need to set an example for the other kids," kind of thing. It was
Mm-hmm.
amazing when I figured that out, how that changed my choir program. Um,
I,
bec- yeah, go ahead.
no, I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. I remember when I was in college, the first time I went to Millikan University. I, s- I I was a part of the women's ensemble at Millikan, and there was a girl. She was black who was a part of the gospel choir and then left. And I said, "Well, why?" I asked her, I said, "Why'd you got the gospel choir?" And she said, "Well, my teacher says that gospel music destroys your voice." And I was like, "Why? Why would they say that?" Like, I didn't know that people people believe that gospel destroys the voice or whatnot because it's chesty and it's harsh or whatnot, or some people say it's harsh or things like that. And so I was always offended when I hear her say that, or that had to do with an audition. It would say like, "Don't sing a gospel song," and I would always be like, "What?" But that's all I know. Like that's what I know is gospel music. That's my tradition. That's my heart. We couldn't listen to R&B or pop or anything that wasn't gospel. We couldn't listen to that growing up because both of my parents are ministers. So
Hmm.
that's the only knowledge that I had was gospel music. We could listen to Michael Jackson though. He was allowed in the house, but nobody else. But that was my background. So that's all I knew. So it was always hard to hear somebody say that something that you do, something that's so dear to you, um, is not. It doesn't have any bearing. It doesn't mean anything because it's not traditional. Um, that was just always mind-boggling to me. But now, as a director, now I tell my students, if I train you how to sing gospel in a healthy way, you'll be just fine. But if you're a soprano and you go blast out Queen of the Night and you don't sing that in a healthy form, that can damage your vocal cords as well. So it's all about just healthy singing. And I think if we as teachers explain it to our students that we just want you to sing healthy and not diminish their background or whatever their background is, I think that builds up the confidence in the singer as well. When I started at UMSL, I was very intimidated because I always felt like I didn't have the same skill set as the white singers. I was the only Black girl in the choir. Um, and I just always felt very, very intimidated because I always thought that they've been singing this core music for all these years and they're better singers than me. And then one day I was like, no, actually, you're not. You're not. I have a different skill set. And once I was trained on how to use my voice and how to use it for when I'm singing gospel and when I'm singing an aria, then that made the world of a difference to me because somebody took the time to teach me how to use my voice and how my voice can do all these amazing things. And I teach that to my choir. My choir, they can go from Haydn to Mozart to Kirk Franklin, and it's all done in a healthy fashion, and it's not diminishing what they already know.
Right. Yeah. So, I think the vocal health thing, I want to circle back to that again, because I feel like that's another example of one of those things we just don't talk about super well, because it tends to, I mean, my goodness, I could go off on a rant about just how many things that when we have conversations with people, that we tend to put in a box of it's either this or it's either this, and how that leads us into hurt feelings and all types of things. Because like the story you just told is, gospel, if you're being told gospel singing, it will destroy your voice. Well, as you mentioned, yes, it can if you're singing in an unhealthy way, but so can Queen of the Night if you're singing in an unhealthy way. So instead, why don't we talk about just like what is healthy singing? And but then on the flip side of that, I also feel like because of some of our I guess societal baggage about talking about things that are cultural and racial, is that there, even on the white people side of this conversation, there are some that would even balk at the idea that sometimes singing gospel singing could be unhealthy. And I would push back a little bit and say, well, let's get at the root of the issue, which is that in a lot of churches, Black or white, there are a lot of churches that either can't afford to or simply don't prioritize financially what it would take to hire someone who's had the training locally to teach. And so there's a lot of lay people teaching people to sing in church all over the country. That are instilling bad and unhealthy vocal habits. And so if we were to direct the conversation towards that problem, because that happens in the rock band churches too, that are primarily in my community, they're primarily white evangelical type churches. And I get kids coming into my choir who they're on vocal rest every other day because they've shredded their voice at church, and they're not singing gospel. They're singing rock music, basically. And they're singing in an unhealthy way because they're being trained by somebody at their church who doesn't particularly understand vocal health or understand the technical aspects or what it can do to a kid long term to be able to do those things. So I always feel like it's better to approach those topics like zooming out from the individual like race or cultural thing, and just say, okay, so what is the issue at here? And I think that's the way you described it is perfect, because I've also come across teachers who teach my kids private lessons that in the classical style that trash kids' voices because they don't understand what they're doing. So that's ultimately, to me, that's the root of the issue, is just training of the teacher. Voce Vista Video is blowing my mind every single time I use it. I'm still about a 2 years or so in the classroom of using this product. It's something I use about monthly, sometimes not even every month, but every bi-monthly, but I use it pretty regularly in my voice studio, and I'll throw it up on the screen in choir rehearsals, and it allows us as a choir to see the entire overtone spectrum that we are creating when we sing. It shows even if the vowel is not the right shape, not the right resonance, the overtones change, and kids can see it. So they can see immediately that they're not singing a pure O anymore. They can see that they're not singing a pure E. Or if the basses are singing a pitch and the tenors join an octave above, they can see immediately that it was skewed up above the pitch or below the pitch. They can see exactly where it is. And for our visual learners and our differentiated learning, that's huge. So check that out. Go to vocevista.com/choralosophy, and then you can try it for free for 30 days. And then once the trial's up, you can put in the code and purchase that and get the discount. Also, we have sightreadingfactory.com, where if you are not on that yet this school year, first of all, you're way behind. I'm not trying to shame you, but get on there. Sightreadingfactory.com is $35 a year for your membership. And then just for a couple bucks a kid, you can add a student membership for each kid, and it's hugely beneficial. You can get the full package, everything that you get if you use your Choralosophy discount code. That'll work there as well. But it's not too late. That's the thing. You can start this stuff with literacy skills with your kids, and you don't need to go buy a How to Teach Literacy textbook. You really don't. You have everything that you need right there. Go listen to episode 18 on this show, where I kind of outline the process. And if you have questions, shoot me an email, but it is not too late. You can start in January. You can start in February. So head to sightreadingfactory.com and grab yourself a membership.
100%. I teach now, after graduating from school, I teach church choirs so differently now. And I even have choir members saying, okay, Maria, I understand why you told us to do this. Oh, okay, I understand why you have us singing in this style versus just yelling out. Growing up, I remember like our lead singer at church, like she would get done singing. Well, first of all, you got to understand, my church that I grew up apostolic, a song can go for 10 minutes because with the spirit will just take over it, and we can sing the same thing. Jesus can work it out, can go 10 minutes easily with no rest. But that singer would come off, would leave like hoarse because she had just sang for 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on this song. But now, like going back and saying, okay, let's try it in this style, and let's give it a break, or let's breathe all the way down. Those same choral techniques that I learned in college, I'm using that with my church choir, and now they're understanding, okay, she really does know what she's talking about, because now my throat is not hurting when I leave church.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah, it's just it's a knowledge thing, and I don't understand. Maybe it's me, but since I have this knowledge of going to school and being an educator, like I just want to help everybody. Like I have workshops now that I run for church choirs, and just explaining to them, why we sing from our diaphragm, or what that feels like, and how to create, how to use your head voice, and how to flip from head voice to chest voice and things like that. I just want to give that knowledge out, because it really is just a knowledge thing. I don't understand how we as educators sometimes feel like we shouldn't educate. Like that bothers me.
Yeah, I think it comes from there. We still have I think it's a human thing. We have this fear that if we educate, as you say, someone, that person might take that as being lectured to or looked down on, right? And of course, we have to, that's something as teachers we have to be careful with all the time. It's you walk a fine line between, hey, here's some information that I think would help you, and how do I present that in a way that doesn't come across to the person as, oh, he thinks I'm stupid and wants me to change everything about the way that I sing, or whatever. And so I think you're voicing a concern that we all have, which is that's like, how do we? And I wish I could answer that from everyone listening to the podcast. I don't think I can, because ultimately it's each person's personality has to work out how we have those conversations with the singers that are in front of us and how we deliver that information. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, because I think another story that came to my mind was with listening to you talk about some of those things was my grandmother. Is in her 90s, and she was a college professor in piano, taught piano at a college for years and years, and is still in her 90s, still teaches piano lessons every so often.
Oh, wow.
But grew up in rural, middle of nowhere, Kansas and Colorado most of her life, in communities that also didn't have either. Well, back then, probably a lot of around the Great Depression, even when she was a kid. Just didn't have the money to to pay for formal music training, right?
Mhm.
So, and of course, everybody around where my grandma was all the time were white. So this is again one of those things where this is crosses color boundaries, where my grandma also learned to play by ear, and
Okay.
even though later became a classically trained pianist, she was one of those ladies that could sit down at the church and just, oh, what hymn do you want to play, and what key
Mhm.
do you want it in, and she could just play it from by ear and from memory. And if she can look at the sheet music, which she can't see anymore, she's too old, but when she could see, she could look at sheet music also and
Okay.
transpose it to other keys and all this kind of stuff, which are things that you don't learn in formal music training. These are things that
Yeah.
you pick up. And so I think there's something to that too, in that depending on what kind um, of training you have, you're going to grow up with different skill sets. And what you said
Yeah.
earlier, where if we could get to a place where as a choral community we have a way to value all of those skill sets, um, in a I think in a way, in a conversational style maybe, that doesn't lift one up over the other,
Right.
but says, all right, how can we combine all these talents to make something even better?
Mhm. True. True.
Do you feel like that's a fair goal?
I think it's fair. I think I'm definitely a better musician because of my training and because of my because of my
Hmm.
ear, my ear. I think that just makes you a overall better musician.
Hmm.
And there's instances when I'm relying on my ear, and there's other instances where I'm like, okay, let me get the score, and
Yeah.
let's read. I mean, but I think I'm better because of it, and I would love to see that, because not only does that make us all better, but it values everybody, and it doesn't make anybody feel like they're less than because they don't have this skill set.
Uh-huh.
And I think with music, we always say, music is the universal language. It's a universal language. But if it's really universal, then we have to value everything that the universe gives us. So if it's giving us somebody who is uh, listening and using their ear to sing the song, or somebody who has sheet music and learning the song, we have to value all of that. And that's what I hope that I do as a conductor. It's really just valuing whatever people have to bring. I value what you have. I can meet you where you are, and then I can help you get to where I want you to be, or you can help me even get to where I should be. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does, and I agree. And I feel like the a cool thing for us as teachers would be is to try to all look for opportunities to find the kid who has a skill, that maybe not everyone in the room does,
Hmm.
and find a way to highlight that,
Yeah.
and point out that, because then, what, even though you're going to make that kid feel great, which is of course an awesome thing, I think even bigger goal is that starts to teach every kid in the class, that, or in the choir, or in the church choir, adults, or anyone, that having different types of skills in itself is a skill, and that's
Yeah.
something that makes the team better. I think that, like, I'm jealous of people who can do stuff by ear, because I could a little bit when I was a kid, when my brain
Hmm.
was more flexible, but now I feel like I'm actually so good of a sight reader that my
Hmm.
brain is completely dependent on that. In fact, I took a gig in April, coming up here, which I'm all super nervous about, because I have to memorize a whole bunch of music. I haven't memorized music since I was like 20, and because that part of my brain is just like, it's turned off. You hand me the score, and I can sing it the first time, but if you put music in my hands and tell me to memorize it and sing it without the score, we'll see. I'll have to update the audience on how that goes. But I'm really kind of scared
See,
about it.
that is so interesting to me, because
Mhm.
everything that I do, even with my scores now, I still memorize it, because it's just natural for me just to have it
Mhm.
memorized.
Now,
That's so interesting.
as a conductor, I memorize.
Hmm.
But because with my high school kids, I'm practicing those songs with them so many times every day that eventually it's memorized fairly quickly, and I can put the score down. But I mean, like, as a singer, like,
No,
which I just haven't done that in forever.
that's what I'm saying. Just in
Hmm.
general,
Yeah.
Anything that I'm singing, I'm memorizing. I'm trying to remember patterns and things like that.
Yeah.
That's just natural to me. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. A friend of mine, he often plays for my that I conduct. We had a concert about 2 weeks ago, and he's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful piano player. But his main instrument is trombone, and score. And I was like, there is no score. Like he's just created all of this just from memory. He just
Uh-huh.
listens to the song he's created, and his arrangements are beautiful, but none of it is wrote down.
Mhm.
None of it is like that.
Yeah, I think it's a psychological thing, that I'm sure has been studied. But when just the way our brains work, if we focus on one skill a lot, the other
Hmm.
skills can kind of atrophy, which is why
Ah,
I think it's so important that in our classroom settings and especially when we're working with young kids, because young kids are their brains are still so flexible and are able to
right.
learn so many different things, that we're giving them as diverse of an experience musically as we possibly
Yes.
can.
Yes.
So because their brain is still open to it, so that's important. So let's switch gears just a little bit towards your group in St. Louis, and one of the reasons that I wanted to chat with you today too is this, because you're the St. Louis Children's Choir is what it's called, right?
Well, I have two groups.
Two groups, okay.
So I work for the St. Louis Children's Choirs,
Yep.
and then I am the artistic director for the Sheldon's City of Music All Star Chorus, which is my high school group. So I have a high school group that I conduct and an elementary group that I conduct.
Got it. And so, as I imagine, for both of those hats that you wear, you've got to do quite a bit of reaching out and recruiting and convincing people to sign up for this. Is
Yes.
that true? So
Yes.
tell us about what that's like, and because a lot of my listeners, of course, probably a vast majority of my listeners work in some kind of a school setting where we do have to recruit a little bit, but at least the kids already are showing up in our building every day,
Hmm.
and the recruiting is different. So tell us about how recruiting for these community groups is so different.
So when we first started, we I'll start with my high school group because that's the one that I really kind of helped birth that group. So with that group, what we did is we sent emails out to teachers and asked teachers to nominate like 4 singers for the chorus. So we did that, and there were 20 kids in my original group, and I wanted to get that number up to 35. So I said the next season, I said I will go out myself, boots on the ground, and recruit kids. So I went to, as many teachers would allow me, I went into the classroom and pitched my program, or asked the teacher if I could clinic their choir for a festival or something. And that's how I recruited kids. Or I would go in and I would audition them and talk about the program. And that became a way to recruit kids for the program.
Hmm.
With my new elementary choir that just started, we got kids for their program a little bit differently. When I arrived at the St. Louis Children's Choirs, the choir that I talked about earlier, the Children in Concert for Excellence, that community honor choir didn't exist. And so started that program back. We started that program back up again, but it was targeted for the North St. Louis County area. We ran that festival 4 times, well, 3 times. I'm sorry, 3 times in North St. Louis County. There, so we had already built a rapport with the teachers in the area, and then I went out into the schools and auditioned kids for the choir. I sent them home with a letter that was like, "Congratulations, your child is amazing. They've been invited to join this choir." And then I called all the kids who gave me a phone number. I called all of their parents and was like, "Hi, my name is Maria Ellis, and I'm from the St. Louis Children's Choirs. And did you know that you had an amazing singer at home? Oh my gosh, they were so great. I would love for them to be a part of this new choir that I'm starting." And so that choir, we started that choir January 8th, and we have 25 kids from the community that's in that choir. And I think that's great for
Hmm.
something that's just starting out, especially in a community that St. Louis Children's Choir is not really known in that community. St. Louis is, I hate to say this, but St. Louis is kind of divided. So it's like all the black people live in certain pockets, all the white people live in certain pockets, and the St. Louis Children's Choirs is predominantly white, and
Okay.
they're predominantly from our West County area, which is a predominantly white area. So we don't have a lot of we have minorities, but not a lot of minorities. So
Mm-hmm.
we went into a community that was predominantly black. So parents sat in throughout the rehearsal, and we just really sold our program. So um, I tried to make it as fun as possible, but also teaching them different styles of music. So we did I taught them like a warm up, lean forward, lean backwards. I taught them a piece about animal imagination, just a fun elementary piece. I taught them a handle piece, just different styles of music so they can see and value that this is not just a regular program that you may see. We can make your child as diverse musically as possible. And the parents bought into the program, and we've been running for 4 weeks, and it's super super exciting.
That's really cool. And so I wonder then, so you obviously must have, as an organization, decided this to target this community to improve diversity in the choir. Was that a conscious decision?
It was conscious on my part because it was my community.
Right,
So
right,
I didn't want I don't want another child who looks like me to have my experience, to love singing and to sing your
right.
whole life and go to college and be told we can't accept you because you can't read the music.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed that with our St. Louis suburban choir, our St. Louis Metro choir, the All-State choir, that there are no black kids from my community represented in those choirs. And so I just started asking questions like, excuse me, why are there no, where's St. Louis, where's and where's the urban Kansas City area? Why are those students not represented in the choirs? And I got a lot of answers, but one of the answers was the sight reading portion. Oh, they can't sight read. Oh, okay. So then I started going to classrooms and watching and noticing that um, some of those schools don't teach sight reading. That's not a priority.
Right,
So I was like, okay, well, I definitely don't want to go in and tell somebody, oh, you should be teaching this or doing that. I don't want to be that kind of person. But I said, how can we, as an organization, how can we help? How can we teach a skill set that they may not be getting in school?
yeah,
Well, in St. Louis Children's Choirs, those students learn to sight read. So why not put a choir in that area where I can take the skills that they have? I know they have great skills of learning by rote. I know that because when I go in and I teach something by rote, they pick it up like that. So that's not an issue. But how can I now take your rote skills and your learning by ear? How can I take that and help you learn to sight read? So that's one of the things that we've really been trying to make a cautious effort in doing. But not only sight reading, some of the other skill sets that I notice is some of them have issues with reading. They don't read words on level.
right.
So starting a library with them and singing, getting a book and singing to them just the words in the book so they can learn how music can help you with your reading skills as well. So those are things that we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's why I've always very much bought into the idea that, yes, of course, there are racial divides still in our country, but ultimately, education is the great equalizer.
Uh huh.
And until the gaps in education are filled in, the areas that where money isn't driving the education to be better, which right now, like in, an area like the parts of St. Louis you're talking about, that's an issue. There's the money isn't there because
Right.
the money speaks, and because I don't want it to sound like I'm saying that money necessarily solves a problem. What I mean by that money driving the solution is that people who have money tend to be able to use that their voice to say, "Hey, the school's not working," and then people will listen and fix it.
Hmm.
Whereas in some of these communities, they don't. And until that happens, I think and as long as some of those areas are primarily not white, then we're going to continue to think that it's primarily a race problem. And I feel like that I'm not saying that race doesn't matter. I've been talking about that on this show a lot, that it does matter, but not in the same way that everybody thinks it matters. It doesn't matter on any kind of human level, like on any kind of like DNA level. It just matters in the way that our society is structured.
Hmm.
And so I feel like the things you're doing to get into an area that has an education gap and to try to supply that, again, I just applaud that you're doing that. That's exactly what more people need to be doing. So I have some advice then to ask you, because my in my situation, and I think in my audience, my situation will probably be a little bit more typical than your situation, because like I said,
Hmm.
most of the people who listen to my show are probably school teachers primarily, where the kids do kind of like, we get a certain group of kids that we can draw from, because they're the kids that live, if we're in public school, that they're the
Hmm.
ones who live in our area, and it's all zoned. So we can't really target an area of town and go recruit the way you've done.
Uh-huh.
But one thing I've noticed over the years, and I shared the story earlier about how one of the ways that I was able to make my classroom more open to students, to Black students, was by pointing out and highlighting some of the cultural things they've learned in church, and that's helped me a lot. But I still feel like I don't, as a white man, I still do run into maybe some skepticism from families when I'm trying to convince them that their kid is good enough, or their kid should participate in this.
Hmm.
And I wonder, you haven't seen me interact with my parents, my students, and my parents, but like, what are some things that might jump out at you of like ways that that the white male choir director, which is still a majority because we are 60% in this country are
Hmm.
white, um, if we're out there in the choir, in our classrooms, and I believe most of the choir directors who look like me and fit my demographic, genuinely do want to reach out to like all their kids,
Hmm.
and but if we fall short of that, what do you feel like might be the cause, and what are some tips that you might give us out there to reach across a cultural boundary and recruit kids?
Um, so I'm not the I don't know everything, but I can tell you what would have worked for me. So
Yes.
in my home, there I grew up with my mother and father, and I have three other siblings. And my brothers were sports people. So both my brothers played football. My dad was a bowler, so they were really, really into sports, because they always said that my brothers would get scholarship money and they would go to school on scholarship because they were so great at their various sports. Okay. We didn't know that music is something that you could get scholarship money for. I
Yeah.
think if my parents would have known that I could have got a full ride by singing, I think they would have taken other steps to push me into music more. Like my parents even told me, like, I apologize because we didn't know.
Hmm.
And I think one thing you have to do is educate and say, look, like, one of my pictures that I give to my students all the time is, I went to school for free. So that's a true fact. Um, and every semester, so wrote me a check because I had so much scholarship money. That was because of singing and applying for music scholarships granted me so much money. And UMSL is a school that's not really it's really an affordable school, but it granted me access to other scholarships that I just didn't know existed. So I
Hmm.
think educating your parents and saying, hey, your child has a gift, and that gift can pay for school. Yes, I understand that they may want to major in biology or whatnot, but an extra $2,000 for being a part of the choir, you don't want to leave that kind of money on the table. So
Uh-huh.
just educating them that it's not just something that we do for fun; it's our way of life,
Right.
and there's money in that. Just like you value basketball, you value football, soccer, whatever. You value that because you see that as money that your child can get in school. So
Right.
that's one pitch that I use for my high school students is, yeah, I sing. You might as well get money for it. If you're gonna do it, why not get money for it? And they understand that now, like Miss Ellis, okay, I understand what you mean and how we can get scholarships. And then I show them all the various scholarships that are offered. We're blessed in St. Louis to have the St. Louis Symphony, and they have a program where they offer scholarships to African American students who pursue music, or that's one scholarship for students who pursue music. But there's another scholarship I believe is for students. who take music while they're in school. They can get money for that.
Yeah.
And UMSL matches that scholarship. So that was an extra $1,000 that I was getting a scholarship just because of that particular program. So I think it's the value, showing them that music has value. Students who sight read and students who are part of all state choirs, I've said in auditions where they've said, oh, they were they're a great singer, and their money level has been raised because of that. So I think
Yeah.
just telling your parents and really get them to understand so much more than just choir. It's so much more than that, and there's value in it that could help your kid.
Yeah. Now that's really good, and because that when you were saying all that, it was like lights were going off in my head because I feel like in almost every case, and keep in mind I've been teaching at the high school classroom for 17 years, and so I've had thousands of kids, so my sample size is pretty large
Hmm.
of lots of backgrounds that I've taught. And with in the times where I've struggled to get um, a black kid, or even some other cultural and ethnic minorities, to stick with choir, because they'll do it for a year to get their fine arts credit, and
Hmm.
then I'll notice that there's some talent there, and in almost every case, if I'm not successful, like if I'm not successful in getting that kid to stay, it's because of something mom and dad didn't want them to waste their time doing.
Hmm.
And so hearing you say it's about finding the angle with the parents that makes them see that it's not just a fun time thing
Right.
is
Hmm.
huge. And I've tried that over the years in some cases, but hearing you kind of talk about it, it definitely is going to make me think more specifically about ways to approach that. Because now, just to give you some examples, I've got well, and actually, I'm going to say it this way, and I'm going to see if you think this is fair. If you are part of a minority community that is raised knowing that there are certain cards stacked against you in the deck of society in order to
Hmm.
be able to be successful, and you've got kids and you're raising your kids, you are going to be mother hen, mama bear. I am going to guard like every choice that my kid
Hmm.
makes to make sure that they are stacking all their cards exactly the right way, so that even though society might want to take something from them, they're going to put themselves in a position where they can be successful. And here comes
Hmm.
this white guy choir teacher telling them that they don't need to take that advanced biology class because they can take choir instead. And I can understand, I think, if I look at it that way, why a mom or a dad in that situation might say, you know what, you need to focus on your real school, your real classes, even though we
Right.
think music is a real class. Like that, a lot of people don't see it that way. Whereas a white family without that social pressure might be able to more freely just say, hey, do whatever you want to do in school. It's fine. Am I out to left field, or do you think I'm onto anything?
Um, I don't think you're totally out in left field, but I also think educating those parents. Okay, I'm just going to use myself as an example.
Yep.
So in high school, I took AP English, AP. So I took AP Calculus, AP English, Advanced Chemistry, um, French 3. I was supposed to take French 4, but it was off. So I took all these high level classes, right?
Hmm.
Which were all great because I thought, and my parents who didn't know anything about advanced placement classes or anything like that, we thought that was going to be the best way for me to get all these various scholarships and whatnot when I went to college.
Hmm.
Great. Okay. When I got to college, um, my roommate, who I don't believe had taken as many advanced classes as I had the same scholarship that I had, and her ACT score was, I think her ACT score may have been lower than mine was. But I was like, all of this was for nothing because we got the same, me and this girl, who she wasn't black, we have the same thing. And I just worked extra hard for no reason. Um, so I think in some cases, educating the parent, I would have loved if somebody would have told my mother and father, Maria has a gift and she can get money in school for singing.
Mm-hmm.
Now we knew my brother's a drummer. We knew he could get a scholarship for drumming, but I didn't know what my skill set that I could have got a scholarship for singing.
Mm-hmm.
I just nobody told us that.
Right.
I thought if to get a scholarship for being a singer, you had to be like some outstanding soprano or somebody who could just really, really, really sing really well. Well, I have a skill set, but I'm not. I mean, I'm not. I love Beyonce, so I'm not the next. I'm not Beyonce or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But with the skill set that I have, I definitely could have got a scholarship and majored in music and would have been just fine. But I
Yeah.
didn't know. So I
Right.
think the education, us as teachers, educating the parents, you got students who can sight read and all that kind of stuff. That's a skill. Your child is if you got a kid in your classroom that's a top sight reader and they're black, what?
Yeah.
That's an amazing skill set to have because I don't know how it is, but I just know in our school, none of us could do that. None
Yeah.
of us could sight read. None of us had that skill set. And if you could sight read like that, then you have no problem, I think, getting into colleges because that's what everybody's looking for you to do. See how well you sight read.
Right. Yeah. And that's something I had shared with you before when we were chatting. Is several of my top sight readers are black, and the well, just top choir members in general are black leaders in the choir, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I we've been trying to work towards this cultural inclusion thing. I'm very much, my
Mhm.
students know this about me. Some of them listen to my podcast probably, but most of them don't. Where they know that I teach in a way that is, I don't really talk about race very much in choir,
Uh-huh.
but they know that I just don't care. Like, in other words, if I look at them, I'm looking at them, and
Mhm.
and I'm going to treat them all the same. But at the same time, I'm also behind the scenes, kind of looking for ways. This conversation is an example of looking for ways to understand why I might not be able to connect with a kid that I want to connect with. And maybe there's some cultural things going on that I just don't understand because I didn't grow up in that way. And I think just the reason I cite that as an example for people listening is that not because I'm some like guru of diversity, because I'm not, but it's just that sometimes all it takes is for kids to see that you care
Yeah.
about including, just for that ice to be broken enough for a few kids that maybe would otherwise be scared off to try it. And then over the years, you can't fix it all in one day in it, but in my program, the example would be that I had, in fact, it's really sweet. I had I have a student who's applying to go be a music major next year, young black lady, and she is probably going to listen to this episode, but I won't say her name. So hi, you know who you are. That wrote an essay about her choir experience, starting in ninth grade, seeing not very many kids that look like her in the top choir, but
Mhm.
coming into the class and knowing that she's welcome anyway, and how that affected her. And now she wants to be a music teacher, and like
Oh,
all of this
wow.
kind of stuff, and it's so touching. But at the same time, it took some students that came in before her, a few years before that, well, really more like 8 or 9 years before that, and some really brave kids when my top choir had not a single black kid in it. And looking at that choir and still thinking, hey, I could do that. And so I think about that in terms of like anybody who is kind of a trailblazer or a pioneer or doing something that other people that look like them don't do. I'm indebted in my program to these kids 8 or 9 years ago they only took my word for it that they were welcome because they didn't see anybody else that looked like them, but they decided they were going to be the first. I had these two boys in my chamber choir, two black boys who were super popular, super good looking, athletic jock kids with 4.2 GPAs and,
Wow.
middle class, but they were still, so in a lot of ways very privileged, but they were just awesome kids. And I convinced them finally their senior year. They'd been in my young, like lower level choirs, but finally convinced them to try out for the top choir. And that was another huge turning point because then the years after that, my ability to convince the young black boys that looked up to those jock popular boys that all the
Yeah.
girls liked that they could do the top choir and
Mhm.
not be looked at as nerdy or whatever, like that's when the floodgates opened. Like,
Yeah.
it was like now everybody knows they're welcome, which is I think important.
And I think on some levels, I always say this, that sometimes you have to see somebody who looks like you
Yep.
doing these things, so you know that you can do them. My son, who is 9, his first few years of life didn't know anything but a black president. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what he knew. He didn't know anything about a white person being president because Obama was president, the years when he, all his years when he was born.
Yeah.
So that just showing somebody that people like you do this. That's why I'm making such a big deal about being a girl conductor and things like that, because I want to show somebody else that you can do this. Just because you're female, you can do this. I always conduct in high heels. It's just something that I love to do.
Uh-huh.
It gives me confidence, and I just love high heels. But that's me showing my feminism. That's it's me being a woman and being a female, and it's just showing another girl that you can do this too. So I would love. I think we talked about during our chat. We talked sight reader was African American. I
Hmm.
would love to see a black kid win the sight reading bee at MMA.
Hmm.
What?
That would
You
be
know how,
amazing.
do you know how that would change the game for so many black kids? Because now
Yeah.
it's not just a nerdy, for lack of a better term, it's not a nerdy white thing. Oh,
Yeah.
black kids do this too.
Hmm.
And sometimes that's just what we need to see. If I taught in an all white school, if I was white and taught in an all white school, and I had black people who were in my top choirs or what, those pictures would be all over my walls. Yes,
Hmm.
she was in my choir. She was in my choir. He was in my choir. Just so they could see people like you, people who look like you were doing these things. That's why I think Dr. Garrett's session with you was so powerful. Black composers, black people who compose. So it's not just Bach and Mozart. Oh, black people. Oh, people that look like me do this. Yes,
Hmm.
that's why we as educators have to make sure that we are educating um, the whole universe. That we're just showing that everybody does these things. It's not just one group of people. And
Yep.
once we get to where people can see themselves, a lot of those barriers will remove themselves because you say, "Oh, it's just regular." I mean, think about the dance shows, the hip hop dance shows. Well, it's not just black people doing hip hop dance. It's black people, it's white people, it's Asian people, it's all kind of people doing hip hop dance.
Yeah.
So now that's not a thing. It's not a only a black thing. Everybody sees themselves doing it, and I would love to see our top choirs, our state choirs, featuring kids that look like all kinds of kids. We only had like 4 black kids in our state choir this year. Where's all the black kids? Where the rest of them at? How do
Hmm.
we get to the point where people who never thought of even envision going to state, they now see people who look like them doing it.
Hmm.
That's where we need to be. And I would love to see us get like that.
I think all 4 of those kids were from KC Metro because we had a pretty diverse group of All-Staters this year
Okay.
compared to past years. Um, and we had a biracial black and white kid last year from our school
Hmm.
make it, and so that progress is happening. But I think that ties back to the All-State thing, ties back to the conversation we're having about 30 minutes ago when we were talking about the parts of the communities where these things aren't being taught. Well, in
Hmm.
Missouri, anyway, of course, we've got people listening to this show all over, but you could, no matter where you live, you could probably identify with this. That in
Hmm.
Missouri, I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but a very high percentage of our black population in Missouri live in Kansas City and St. Louis,
Hmm.
in the cities where a lot of this stuff isn't being taught as much in school. Now, in Kansas City, I know because I know Kansas City better than St. Louis. There are some teachers that are in the urban areas that are working really hard and feel like they're working an uphill battle in that area, but
Hmm.
they're trying. So I feel like this is a thing that it because I'm a little bit older than you, Maria, but I've definitely been around the choir world quite a bit longer.
Hmm.
There is progress. Like this is, even though it doesn't look like it, when you look at four all staters or whatever,
Uh-huh.
um, the I'm encouraged because I see the progress, and I know it would be easy
Hmm.
to focus on what we haven't done yet, but I think that's important to point out because I see when you come into the to a convention with your posse of ladies and and ladies of color and and proudly walking around our conventions and making friends and being so jovial and wearing your girl conductor shirts, like to me that's something that I just would not have seen at a convention 20 years ago.
Mm.
It would not have happened there, even if there was um, a black female conductor, and there were back then 20 years ago. But the idea that there would be like a social group and an outspoken group and like that, to me, you are a sign of progress. You and your friends are a sign of progress. So it's happening. We're going to get there.
But you know what, Chris? People who follow me on Facebook, they notice that at conventions I take lots of pictures, and I always make sure I take pictures with African American people. Now, the reason why I do that is not because I'm racist, because if you look up my picture wall, I take pictures with everybody. I just like taking pictures. But I want other Black people to
Yep.
see we are here. We come to these conferences and our voices matter. So I was talking to a teacher the other day. I was like, why don't you go to the why don't you go? Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's for me. I don't know if the sessions are for what I teach. I said, so why are you not presenting the session? You have a skill set. If you teach in an all Black school, you have a skill set that somebody who is teaching in an all white school, they have a different experience. Why are you not talking about your experience and how you teach and how you
Hmm.
handle teaching a student who may have whose best friend may have been shot at a football game, because that's something that's very real in St. Louis. How are
Hmm.
you still teaching through all that trauma? Why are you not presenting a session about that? So over the years, I've noticed that more and more Black teachers are coming, and it's just because I love it. I've always loved it since I've been coming. The last, I guess, 5 years, I guess 5 or 6 years or so.
Hmm.
I love it because I love, number one, I love being able to see everybody. It's like a big family reunion to me. No matter what color you are, I don't care. I love everybody. Um, but that the camaraderie that we have as a state, I love being around that. But I also love being around just great musicians and just learning from everybody. Like that's my heart. So if it takes me wearing a T-shirt that says "Girl Conductor" and me taking pictures with 200 people while I'm there, I'll do that just so everybody feels included. And I think we're making progress. I really do think we are making progress, Chris. I really do think so.
Yeah, I talked about it a little bit on. You mentioned the episode with Marcus Garrett in episode 17. We talked a little bit about I revealed and I kind of was open that I used to not understand why you would go to a convention and post a bunch of pictures with your black friends because, and I wouldn't have ever called you racist. I don't like that word. I
Hmm.
hate that word. Um, but I would have said, well, why does she care? Like what skin color they were? Because I don't care. And it
Hmm.
took me a while to put, because I've only been white my whole life. Like I don't know I don't know anything else, and I also have been white in a part of a country. So of course our country is about 60% white, but the part I
Uh-huh.
grew up in is even more than 60% white in the suburbs. So and even before I came to the suburb of Kansas City, I lived out in the middle of Kansas where it was probably 98% white.
Okay.
And then I moved to Kansas City, where then we're talking about like 75%, So I've always
Hmm.
been part of the majority. And it took me really diving into some psychologists' explanations of what humans do when to to try to belong when
Hmm.
they look around and they don't see themselves belonging. And there are a lot of mental gymnastics that we learn how to do in order
Hmm.
to belong when the picture of the world we look at doesn't show us that we belong. It's like a
Hmm. Hmm.
biological need, like we need to belong. And so by studying that and by understanding it, I've come to have changed my opinion about how I look at something like what you're doing. And now I see your stuff on Facebook, and I get it, and I applaud it. I'm like, yes, that's we need to be, because then the student I talked about, who's going to go major in music next year. I now understand that it was because she saw students that look like her,
Hmm.
that she's doing what she's going to do. And 7 or 8 years ago, I wouldn't have understood that. I would have thought of it like, well, all my kids are the same. None of them have any differences that matter. They're all just
Hmm.
humans, which I do believe. Like, I believe that we're all humans and that that's what's most important. But now I get that, like, everybody is going to create these needs to belong. And I think what you're doing is making it easier for people to do that.
I try to my so growing up, I grew up. I was my area where we live was part of the. I don't know if you heard of the white flight. Well,
Oh
when we
yeah.
started school, okay, so we started school. It was predominantly white, and then over the years went predominantly black. So I've always had friends of all different races because, and I'm just a really really friendly person. I
Yes,
just
you
I
are.
just I just love talking to people. Like that's just it got me in a lot of trouble when I was a kid, but I always just love talking to people. Um, and so I love that we as a state and as a community of musicians, and I'll speak of all musicians, we are really trying to get it right. Like I feel like people are generally just trying to figure out how do we get this right,
Yep.
and and I'm grateful that I get to speak in front of all kind of audiences, and people get to see a black lady who is not ashamed of who she is, professional, but still who she is, and just be Maria, and they accept me for who I am. I'm so grateful for that. I can't tell you, Chris, how many times I've presented and then had a black lady or a black student that was in the audience that came to me like in tears and just say, just thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. As you were speaking, I saw myself, and in those moments, I know that I'm doing what God has blessed me to do, and that's just to be Maria and try my best to be a symbol of love and unity and whatever else I'm needed to be. But I really pride myself in doing that, and I feel like that's the gift that God gave me, and I want to share that with everybody. I really love everybody, but I also want people who look like me to know that yes, we have a place too. It's not just one person's world, it's all of our worlds. We have a place, and we have to use the gifts and talents that we were given, and let them have their place in the world as well. I
Right.
hope that makes sense.
No, it's great, and it makes a lot of sense, and it's actually a great final word. I think we could wrap up the conversation at this point. We've been going at this a while. I'm having fun, but yeah, I think that's a perfect way to close, because all the things you just said are the reason I'm doing this series on the show, and the reason that I wanted to highlight conversations like this, because I think they matter, and your perspective matters, and your perspective, and no matter what your musical background was before you arrived in the choral community, you're making our community richer, and I think everyone out there listening needs to know that that's true of them as well.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been great chatting with you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. See you later. Well, didn't I tell you she was a blast? Thank you so much for sticking around to listen to that conversation. And again, I hope you got something out of it. So continue to join the conversation. As I mentioned earlier, I encourage you, if you're sticking around to the end of the episode, you must be getting something out of it. Either that or you like to torture yourself. I don't know. But if you're sticking around to listen to the end, then I'm going to assume that you are getting something deep and something fulfilling out of this. And I know I am when I make these episodes. These conversations have helped me grow in ways that I just cannot possibly explain to you. So I encourage you to help other people find the show as well by liking, rating, subscribing. If any of those things, if you have not done them already, take an episode that really meant something to you and share it on your social media. And of course, you can help a lot by joining over at patreon.com/choralosophy for as little as $3 a month. There are different levels on there that you can jump on and have different types of access, which is really fun and exciting, and that community over there is continuing to grow. So these are all great things that you can do. Plus, of course, it's really helpful if you decide you need some sheet music that you hit up Graphite and Ryan Main and use the Choralosophy promo code. It helps you, helps them know that people are listening to the show. Those are things that really, really help. Also, if you have not yet tried your free trial of Voce Vista Video, you've got to at least play with that for 30 days. And I think you will figure out that this is a powerful classroom tool. So go to choralosophy.com and you can see all the different sponsors, including Sight Reading Factory, Voce Vista, the sheet music publishers that are on board, and you can get a lot of great tools and get that discount as well. So I hope you stick around for the next installments of this mini-series. You've got more coming up in February. Stay tuned.